your goal to be proud of yourself. Be proud of every step you take. Warm good afternoon to one and all gathered here for the virtual lecture series, Scientific Ethics in Publications, jointly organized by Research and Development Cell, Kognadu Arts and Science College, Coimbatore, and Dr.M.Aruchami Research Foundation. Prayer is nothing else than being on terms friendship with God. Now I welcome St. Mercy Board Girls, Daisy and Balani to sing the prayer song. Girls,
गणनायकाय गणदेवताय गणाध्यक्ष धीमहि गुणशरीराय गणमण्डिताय गुणेशानाय धीमहि गुणाधीक्षाय गुणप्रविष्टाय धीमहि एकदन्ताय वक्रतुण्डाय गौरीतनयाय धीमहि गजेशानाय बालचन्द्राय श्रीगणेशाय धीमहि एकदन्ताय वक्रतुण्डाय गौरीतनयाय धीमहि गजेशानाय बालचन्द्राय श्रीगणेशाय धीमहि.
thank you, girls. Sunshine is a welcome. It brings a lot of brightness. Now I request Dr. R. Sivaprakash Sir, Associate Dean R&D, Kognadu Arts and Science College, Coimbatore, to welcome the gathering. Please, sir.
Thank you. A warm good afternoon to all here for the online talk on ethics in public. Thanks to each and every one of you for being here with us today. I am very pleased to be able to welcome all of you who are familiar as well as who are new to this topic of this today's presentation. At the outset, I would like to thank our secretary and Dr. Was, respected Principal Dr. Dr.M.Aruchami sir, for giving me the opportunity to welcome you all on this occasion. Now, ethics, to my knowledge, is a branch of knowledge that deals with moral principles, or in other words, say it's moral principles that govern a person's behavior or conduct of activity. So, which is for this presentation is about publication. On behalf of the management, organizers of this event, students, and others, welcome our speaker, Dr. Kumar, in botany for continuing to enlighten on scientific ethics in publication. Well, I don't want to take much of your time since I need to leave some time for you this the details about the so a very warm welcome to each and every one of us over here. Thank you very much for listening to me for the short talk, and let us welcome Dr. Kumar to impart his knowledge to us. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Winners are not people who never fail, but people who never quit. I now humbly request and invite Dr. M. Lakshmanaswamy sir, Principal, Kognadu Arts and Science College, Coimbatore, to deliver the presidential address. Please, sir.
Thank you, Betty. Good afternoon, one and all present here. Most respected Secretary, Syndicate Member of Bharatiya University, Dr. C.A. Vasagi Madam, and eminent scientist, Dr. S. Balasamy sir, Dean R&D, Department of Botany, Dr. S. R. Shankar, Dean Academics, Head Department of PG Biotechnology, HOD of Botany, Tenmoli Madam, members, Dr. K. Karthika, Assistant Professor of Botany, Dean R&D and Head Department of PG, and in charge for today Biotechnology PG, Dr. R. Sivaprakash, faculty members, research scholars, PG and UG students, on behalf of the management, I'm also that inviting all of you for a virtual lecture on scientific ethics in publication, jointly organized by and Dr.M.Aruchami Research Foundation. I really important also the R&D cell. Topic. So for MPhil scholars and PhD, even for the student UG and PG project students, this topic is very, very important. And of the management, I am a resource person and eminent speaker, T. Muthukumar sir, Associate Professor of Botany, Bharatiya University, Coimbatore. Some ethical issues in writing and publishing. The ethical integrity is essential to writing and publication. Important ethical things to consider while writing a manuscript include etiquette, fraudulent publication, plagiarism, duplicate publication, authorship, and potential for conflict of interest. Strategies have been developed to prevent or detect ethical violations, and use of these strategies will enhance ethical integrity when preparing a manuscript for publication. Once you have an idea for a publication, you want to be creative and original. You also may build another colleagues while following basic ethical principles in writing and publishing. Important ethical issues to include the fraudulent publications, plagiarism, duplicate publication, authorship, and the potential for conflict of interest. When preparing and submitting manuscript for publication, proper etiquette procedures should be considered, and these procedures include obtaining and adhering to the information for others for the journal, enclosing a self-reliance. Then you need to understand the umbrella term fraudulent publication, as it encompasses several concepts including plagiarism, fabrication, and falsification. The fraud or misconduct can occur for a variety of reasons, including human nature, status, power, fame, and circumstances of environment, competition, pressure to get ahead, inadequate supervision, etc. Plagiarism is a significant violation of truthfulness and involves stealing intellectual property or taking credit for other individuals' work. Coming to the duplicate publication, also known as redundant publication, duplicate involves publishing the same material in the same format in more than one journal, book, or internet resource. Then coming to the authorship, author issues consistently surface in issues tend to arise when writing a manuscript with multiple authors. Authorship disagreements can lead to embarrassment, anger, animosity, bitterness, rigged friendship, and destruction of professional relationship, and ultimately can damage careers. And with these few words, I really appreciate the organizers for the selection of the topic. ஒரே ஒரு வார்த்தை தமிழ் சொல்ல போனோம்னா, அது நீங்க பார்த்திருப்பீங்க, ஒரு கிராமம் வந்து பார்த்திருப்பீங்க. ஒரு தோட்டத்துல வந்து பாத்தீங்கன்னா ஒரு மாந்தோப்பு இருக்கும், அல்லது தென்னந்தோப்பு இருக்கலாம், மாந்தோப்பு இருக்கலாம். பழங்கள் வந்து நிறைய பழுத்திருக்கும், இளநீர் வந்து நிறைய இருக்கும், தேங்காய் வந்து கீழே விழுந்து கிடக்கும். இருந்தாலும் அந்த ஊருக்குள்ள வந்து ஒரு பொருளை வந்து யாரும் வந்து தொட மாட்டாங்க. So this is ethics. அடுத்தவங்களுடைய பொருளுக்கு வந்து நாம வந்து ஆசைப்படக்கூடாது. ஒரு பாத்தீங்கன்னா ஒரு ரோட்ல வந்து இன்னைக்கு சின்ன சின்ன குழந்தைங்க, ஒரு ஆட்டோ டிரைவரா இருந்தாலும் சரி, ஒரு சமீபத்தில் நம்ம பார்த்தோம், ஒரு மாணவர் வந்து ஒரு சின்ன ஒரு குழந்தை பையன் வந்து எத்தனையோ ஒரு 50,000 ஒரு ஆட்டோவில் வந்து யாரோ பணத்தை மறந்து வச்சு போட்டு போயிட்டாங்க. அந்த வந்து ரஜினி எங்களுக்கு கையில் தான் கொடுக்கணும்னு சொல்லிட்டு ரஜினியை வச்சு வந்து போட்டோ எடுத்தாங்க. ஸோ இதெல்லாம் தான் எத்திக்ஸ். சின்ன வயசுல இருந்தே வந்து அடுத்தவங்களுடைய பொருள் வந்து நம்ம ஆசைப்படக்கூடாது. அது பணமாக இருக்கலாம் அல்லது பொருளாக இருக்கலாம். இதான் அந்த காலங்கள்ல வந்து இருந்துச்சு. பட் இன்னைக்கு இந்த மிஷனரி லைஃப் எல்லாம் ஒண்ணுக்கு ஒண்ணு போட்டிகளும் ஒரு காம்படிஷன். நானும் பேப்பர் வந்து போடுறது சின்ன பாத்தீங்கன்னா இப்ப இவங்க எல்லாம் வந்து 30 வருஷம் மோர் தென் 30 இயர்ஸ் சர்வீஸ். இப்ப பால் சாம்சர்லாம் வந்து ஒரு 50 பேப்பர் 100 பேப்பர் போட்டுக்காங்கன்னா டெஃபினெட்லி அவருக்கு வந்து பாத்தீங்கன்னா அவருக்கு விஷயம் இருக்குது. முத்துக்குமார் சார் முத்துக்குமார் ஆனாலும் சரி, முத்துக்குமார் சார் ஆனாலும் சரி, பாலுசாமி சார் ஆனாலும் வந்து தே ஆர் வெல் எக்ஸ்பீரியன்ஸ்டு டீச்சர்ஸ். 30 வருஷம் ஒர்க் பண்ணவங்க மீறி மீறி பேப்பர் 100 பேப்பர் முருகன் பாத்தீங்கன்னா அவர் டிசி வாங்கியிருக்கிறார், டாக்டர் ஆஃப் சயின்ஸ். அவரெல்லாம் பாத்தீங்கன்னா நிறைய வந்து ஃபாரின் ஃபாரின் போயிருக்கிறாங்க. அவங்க போடுறது வந்து நம்ம ஆட்சி ஒண்ணுமே கிடையாது. இன்றைய சூழலில் சில ஆராய்ச்சி மாணவர்கள் தேவையில்லாதெல்லாம் பண்ணிருக்கீங்க, அதெல்லாம் வேண்டாம். நீங்க வந்து obey the rules and regulations of the department and also guide. கைடு எது சொல்றாங்களோ அதை நீங்க ஒரு பேப்பர் போட்டாலும் சரி, 2 பேப்பர் போட்டாலும் சரி. நாங்க போர்டு மீட்டிங்ல டிஸ்கஸ் பண்ணும்போது டாக்டர் ரமேஷ் கிட்ட டிஸ்கஸ் பண்ணும்போது, சார் என்ன சார் இது நீங்க ஸ்கோப்பஸ்ங்கிறீங்க, அப்புறம் வந்து HNDXங்கிறீங்க, நாங்க ஆர்ட்ஸ் அண்ட் சயின்ஸ் காலேஜ்ல வந்து பேப்பர் போடுறதே ரொம்ப சிரமமா இருக்கு சார். ஒரு யூஜிசி கேர்லிஸ்ட்ல போடுறது எங்களுக்கு சிரமங்க. ஏன்னா எங்களுக்கு வந்து 16 மணி நேரம் டீச்சிங். அதுக்கப்புறம் தான் பிஃபோர் தி காலேஜ் அவர்ஸ் ஒரு ஆப்ஜெக்ட் அவர்ஸ் நாங்களும் ஆராய்ச்சி பார்த்து பண்ணணும். பட் நீங்கள வந்து யூனிவர்சிட்டி ஸ்டாஃப் மெம்பர்ஸ்ல வந்து உங்களுக்கு ஃபுல் டைம் ரிசர்ச் இருக்கிறீங்க. நீங்க வந்து பேப்பர் வந்து ஹை இம்பாக்ட் ஒரே வார்த்தை சொன்னாரு, சார் நான் எல்சிஎல் பேப்பர் போடுறதுக்கு 2 வருஷமா பேப்பர் எழுதிருக்கேன்னு அவர் சொல்றாரு. டாக்டர் ரமேஷ் ஹெச்ஓடி இன்சார்ஜ் ஆஃப் டிபார்ட்மெண்ட் ஜூவாலஜி பாரதிய யூனிவர்சிட்டி அவர் சொன்ன ஆன்சர் என்னன்னு கேட்டீங்கன்னா, ஒரு எல்சிஎல்ல நான் ஒரு பேப்பர் போடுறதுக்கு நான் 2 வருஷம் பேப்பர் எழுதிருக்கிறேன் சார் அவர் சொல்றாரு. அது உண்மை. அதனால நமக்கு கல்லூரி மாணவர்கள் யாரும் என்னமோ பண்ணிட்டு போறாங்க. ஏன்னா இந்த பிளாஜரிசம் வந்துருச்சு. நீங்க வந்து அந்த 20% or 30% மேல இருந்துன்னா தீசிஸ் சப்மிட் பண்ண முடியாது. அதனால இந்த மாதிரி விஷயங்களை வந்து ரொம்ப ஜாக்கிரதையா இருங்க. ரிசர்ச் ஸ்காலர்ஸ் இருந்தாலும் கைடா இருந்தாலும் சரி, வந்து ஒரு பேப்பர் போட்டாலும் 2 பேப்பர் போட்டாலும் சரி, நோ ப்ராப்ளம். நீங்க அது வந்து நம்மளுடைய 100 பேப்பர் 200 பேப்பர் 500 பேப்பர் போட்டு ஒன்று நம்மளுக்கு ஒன்றும் ஒரு ப்ரமோஷனல் இன்கிரிமெண்ட் யாரும் கவர்மெண்ட் கொடுக்க போறது கிடையாது. அது நம்மளுக்கு ஒரு இன்ட்ரெஸ்ட், நம்மள ஒரு ஆராய்ச்சி ஆகணும், நம்ம துறையை வந்து அப்கிரேட் பண்ணுங்கிறத எம்ஃபில் பண்றோம், கைட் பண்றோம். அதனால குறுக்கு வழியில வந்து தயவுசெய்து வந்து யாரும் போக வேண்டாம். அதனால இந்த மாதிரி ஒரு டாபிக் எடுத்தது வந்து உண்மையிலேயே வந்து நான் வந்து தாவரவியல் துறைக்கு வந்து கண்டிப்பாக வந்து நான் தெரிவிக்கிறேன். கிராண்ட் சக்சஸ். Thank you for the opportunity given.
Thank you, sir. Make life a masterpiece. Imagine no limitations on what you can be, have, or do. It's an immense pleasure to welcome and invite Dr. S. Palsami, sir, Dean, Research and Development, Kongunadu Arts and Science College, Coimbatore, to felicitate the gathering. Please, sir.
Thank you, Betty. Revered Secretary Madam of our college, respected Principal, the most distinguished today's guest, Dr. T. Muthukumar, Associate Professor of Botany, Bardiyar University, who is having vast experience not only in writing the paper, but also a field explorer, a very good field explorer he is, and the other faculty members who are actively involved in research activities and research scholars. Good afternoon to everybody. It is an opportunity for me to offer felicitation for this most interested and most needed topic at this juncture for almost all research scholars and faculty members. So publication, ethics in the publication. In the past recent 1 decade, almost all publishers, they are taking care about the plagiarism and the reality of the content of the paper is the most important. Even it is very small, the piece of work is very small, the reliability of the data is most essential. That's why in the competitive world, every day, many journals, they are coming. And online, after digitalization in the global level, many online journals are coming. And when you submit the paper or article, in the same day itself, they are publishing by collecting some amount. So don't prefer such type of journals for your valuable publication. you take your own time and discuss with a number of other persons who are having expertise in the area of your subject and finalize the paper after completing your work. Definitely, it will be published in most noteworthy, the high impact factor journals. In your tenure of PhD, if you publish one paper, that is enough. That should be in a very good quality journal. Then only your work will be valid and people will respect you when you go wherever for your job and other areas. So this is the most essential. And apart from that, designing of the work, that is most important. Designing a piece of work that may be very small, that should be very simple and sequential. So the contents or the chapters, if you are planned to do in your work, that should be a very sequential. It should not overlap each other, but at the same time, they have some connections between them. Then only the work will be very valid. And another important thing, your objectives. That means that should be very crystal clear. No need to write page together for objectives and other. That should be very crystal clear, sharp. Then only your thesis, your work will be most attractive to other persons. They will follow in future. And then connections between the chapter. So I have come across some of the thesis in my past tenure. There, first chapter and second chapter of the work, real field work or experimental work in laboratory, they don't have connections between them. The chapters are entirely different from each other. There is no logic in framing such work. So the designing that is more essential. The topics, what you are going to do, they should have some connections between them. Then only the work will really get some outcome. We can get some outcome from the work. And plagiarism nowadays, we are saying plagiarism. Suppose if it exceeds 5% or something like that, sometimes they will punish the author in terms of cutting the DA, TA, or sometimes they are removed from the job also. That kind of, I heard something in the Western countries, the plagiarism level, when it goes beyond prescribed level, types of punishments also be there. In India, now in university level, college level, we are also having separate committee for plagiarism in our college. Some 10 days back, one circular also given to all staff members and the research scholars before publishing their thesis of PhD or MPhil and the article, any articles to be published in journals, that should be checked for plagiarism in our Ubuntu software. It is available in our library. Our secretary madam, by request by the IQAC of our college and the research cell of our college, bought that software for checking of the plagiarism level. So before going the final publication or submission of the paper to any type of journal, that should be checked. It is for the benefit of viewers only. So these are the very simple things we have to follow. And repeatedly, you should not write the same sentence what they have done already. So that is the reputation. That is called as copy. So use synonyms. Now in the digital world, we can immediately find out the synonyms for the particular word. When you use the synonyms, you should be very careful about the prepositions. Otherwise, grammatical error will come. So all these things you discuss with any English professor, one or two papers when you write in this way means definitely it will be practiced and it is very, very easy also for people like research scholars. And then the sampling size, important sampling size that should be for the study. Some of the government organizations, because of the limited sampling size, invention is purely irrelevant to development. Example, the Ayurveda, the Ayush department, the central government department under one autonomous body that is called as Central Council for Research in Ayurveda Science. So this is autonomous body coming and it actually permission to manufacture and market some drugs like I9, insulin management expert. This IME. IME 9 is used for the diabetics treatment. Actually, in the field trial is very inadequate for that one. Less than only. Yeah, very huge advertisement they have made some 10 years back. But trials they have made is very few. But what happened? Uh, Niranjan Sakare, he purchased the pill and considered it as doctor advice along with this normal that is the gluconam G. On 1 week, he had side effects, and again he considered side effects were very serious at the time. Immediately he told the doctor. The doctor advised not to take care of the IM9. So that is the side effect, that problem. But this tablet is under the permission of this Ayush, they are manufacturing and marketing. This is the actually the content was published in one the Predator journal. Based on the article published in the Predatory journal, the Central Council permitted the drug company to produce that one. So this is entirely little evidence, but they made very big claims. So BGR34, this other tablet, only BGR blood glucose regulator, BGR 54, 50, sorry, BGR 34, 156% as are tested. So trial very, very less. It's also published on bone. This is for some bone fractures. The tablet has been given. This is only 16%, 16% are patients were under trial. Based on that, he published that work in some journal. Based on all these publications, the government asked the company to produce it, and it is more also. Another important, the Ayush 64, that is another purpose of treating the malaria. Actually, the Central Council for Ayurvedic Research, it patented the Ayush 64 in 1980. This has been commercialized after 2000 only. What happened during epidemic period in Assam and Rajasthan, this tablet has malaria treatment. One he is called as Neha from the National Institute of this malarial research in Delhi. Field survey, and he tested the patients who consumed the Ayush 64. But out of hundreds he analyzed, it is not any significant effect. Government investing large amount based on the publication made in some predatory journal. So how the money is wasted? So publication that valid in good journal. Predatory journal, one person called Jeffrey Beer, he is the authorized person to enlist the predatory journal. So all these data published in various journals, they are listed as predatory, possibly predatory. So this type of publication would not be encouraged. So we have to publish, even it is one paper in our tenure, that is enough. That should be in a good quality journal, impact factor journal. So many journals are available. Our hard work, that is the most important. And you have to consult who already that you consult definitely that will improve your right as the other experience I can give. Also some for the past 5 recruited in our college, they things all they are but still they have improved. The scholars also are into this area, so they have So it's my advice. In fact, R&D cell and then the Dr. So how to ethics of resource is having very good knowledge of and they ask all the research scholars to it will be useful for
Dr. Muthu, Associate Professor in Botany, PhD in the this is on the fungal arbuscular mycorrhizal fungus and other research
reason of compulsion. So many of them are because when there is such compulsion, anything, that's what science actually. And again, there is also a lot of competition for publishing high impact factor journals, right? Unless you publish in good journals with good impact factors, so you will not be attracting or you will not be getting any schemes or projects or the grants. So for getting the project or the grants, it is important to publish your work in good impact factor journals, right? So you could see here there is a scientific communities are always under a lot of pressure actually, right? So for their growth, not only for their growth, sometimes even to retain their present position, actually they have to they are in a lot of pressure actually. This generally there's a lot of compulsion, right, to do certain things, which may sometimes end up in wrong section, right? So first of all, we should understand why should we publish actually papers or anything, books or chapters or anything like that actually. One, there are several important things that depends upon the individuals actually. One is to fulfillment of a certain academic degree. For example, if you're going to submit a PhD degree, now we know that there is a mandatory to publish papers in certain quality journals before you could submit a thesis, right? Again, the problem comes here. One is that so you might have already published a paper, for example, as a KASC, right? So in this KASC, one important thing happens is that the journals actually come and go frequently actually. So this is one of the important things you should understand actually. So you might have be in the second year, third year of your research program where you might have published your paper. So at the end of the third year or the fourth year, when you are starting, you are trying to submit your thesis, and you check the list of this care, actually the journal might have disappeared. So automatically there is a pressure for you, right? So this is one of the biggest problems we generally have. And second one is that we always wanted to improve our biodata, or what we call the CV actually. So automatically what happens is that when you want to have a strong CV, automatically you should have a very good publication. So automatically you should go in for publication. And again, the promotion. So when you are in a job, right? So when you want to reach a higher level automatically, so there are certain criteria. So there are also certain measures of fields actually generally kept for example, for the faculty members for their promotions and other things. So where a certain number of publications are always requested, right, are being kept as a eligibility criteria to move on to the next stage actually. So this is also a large number of pressure actually for the faculty members actually, right? So, and there are certain people who wants to get a fame and name actually in their particular field. So automatically what they do is that they start to work and publish a large number of papers in field actually. And next one is actually the academic publication. Automatically, unless you have good publication as well as the good research actually, right? To your academic reputation would not be good actually. So automatically to have this academic reputation, normally we go in for publication. And as I already told you, it is again for getting grants and fellowships actually, publications are very, very important. Even for example, I think you might have known about this PhD scholars when for this PSIR grants actually, automatically they actually screen your applications mostly based on the publications that has been published in good journals, right? And again, there are very few people who generally publish for personal pleasure. So it is not of any compulsion, just on their own actually they used to publish. So this is the various ways by which actually, for which actually the people starts to publish actually, right? Their research works actually. Right. So this is a very important cartoon issue, right? It's not very easy to publish a paper in a good journal. So there are a number of yardsticks actually that have to be overcome before your paper or your manuscript gets accepted, right? And there are large number of scientific ethics that are there actually. Although we say that scientific research is a noble profession, right? So this is actually marked by a large number of temptations to falsify and fabricate data, because you see your junior might be having a good publication, so automatically when actually or two of you will be on the same cadre actually, and one will be having a good publication and another person would not be having. So automatically what happens is that you wanted to be equal with that particular person or you want to overtake that particular person, automatically the problem starts actually. And next important thing is actually what we call the plagiarism. Because understand, no one of us actually have English as our mother tongue. This we should really understand. Actually. So English is only a learned language for us actually. So we don't anyway. I don't think anyone of us English as our mother tongue, or we are not a native English speakers actually. So automatically what happens is that our writing skills, right, would not be as correct or as compatible with that of a native English speaker actually, right? So this thing we should always understand first of all actually. So people talk about plagiarism and other things, but we often fail to understand this particular thing. Who actually so this actually, this English or the any writing skill is a that should come in practice actually. It comes always in practice actually. So what we normally do is that we don't allow right from our childhood. We are not allowed to write on our own actually. Understand? So we are not allowed to write on our own. So in our schools, you might have known that. So if you rewrite what is already given in your textbook, so you will be given full mark actually, right? So that is how we are trained from our school days actually. So whatever that is given in your textbook, if you repeat it, and a person who actually, right, perfectly repeats what is actually in a textbook, he will be given the full mark actually. So this is one of the problems actually that starts from our childhood. Well, once we come to what we call it as the higher education, college or colleges, what we do is that we are given actually assignments, right? For because it is a part of your examination evaluation, so you are given assignments for internals actually. So what we again we do is that we start to take things that is already there in the books. We don't write anything of our own. So what we had understood, we don't write. What we take other sources and use to repeat it in our assignments. You understand? So this the main problem with this, that is what we call it as Asian culture and in other European or other cultures is that they are actually what they do is that they always ask actually the assignments or the essays to be submitted in a soft copy actually. So whenever this is submitted in a soft copy, so it is already it is generally put into a plagiarism software, and when the plagiarism, right, exceeds a particular limit actually, you have to resubmit your assignment or your essay, and when you're doing it repeatedly more than certain period of time, just you are pushed out of your course actually. That never happens in India actually. So automatically what it does is that we don't practice actually original writing in India. So that is one of the biggest problem, because although we say plagiarism is a wrong thing, that is not something to be objected. Yes, it is a wrong thing, but problem is that where it actually starts, it actually starts from our childhood. We are not allowed to think and write independently. That is the biggest problem. And second important thing is the falsification of the data. So in many cases, people generally do that. So they might have done your work actually, right? And automatically what happens in certain cases, understand, any experiments, generally more failures are common in scientific research actually. Generally you fail several times before you achieve something actually. But people do not agree with that actually. So what people want to do is that every time they do, it always be a success. So this is one of the biggest problems generally we have in many of this scientific research actually, especially in India. So you could see any experiment that is done actually becomes a success at the first instances. For example, you might have known about the Gregor Mendel actually. So how many times actually he failed before giving almost all the theories actually. So we don't understand those things, right? And this is one of the problems, because we are compelled to complete our research degree, for example, a PhD degrees are within something around 2 years or 3 years or 4 years, right? So automatically when your experiments start failing actually, So what you do is that there is no other go for you to go in for some type of misadventure like these things actually. So you whatever the data you get, actually you put up the data or you just manipulate the data. So this is causes what we call the falsification of the data. Next one is what we call it the duplicate publication, which the principal was also talking. So this is one of what understand. Any paper should not be submitted simultaneously or managed should not be simultaneously to more than a single journal actually. So what happens is that even though now we have gone into electronic mode actually for paper submission, still you could see there is a large amount of time consumption, right? From the submission to having your result or report on the landscape. For example, it must be around 3 months or almost to 6 months for the reports to arrive actually. But I don't know why there is such type of in the giving you the result of your landscape, because most of the journals, right, or highly rated journals, they give only actually 15 to 21 days for the reviewer to complete the process. So you have to complete the review and submit your review within 21 days. At the most, some journals give actually not more than a month actually. But these journals generally take almost 3 to 6 months to give a decision to the what we call it as an author actually. Right. And this often, what happens is that, so to cut short the time frame, many students think that instead of submitting a paper to a single journal, why don't we submit it simultaneously to 2 or more journals? So which journal gives you the first report actually? So accordingly, you could withdraw the paper from the other things or something like that. So understand when in certain cases, what the certain journals do is that, right? So they don't come to the authors immediately going for publishing their papers actually. I will show you some of the examples like that actually. So without one paper he would be revising, right? And he might have submitted the same paper to another journal. So that journal actually will never actually submit any report from the reviewer to the author actually. Instead, what they do is that whenever they got insufficient number of papers for a volume, they immediately publish that particular paper without the consent of the author. So this actually results in what we call the redundant publication. And sometimes this redundant publication also are done actually with certain intentions. I will tell you later on what these intentions are actually, right? And there are also methods or instances where actually, so you generally give far-fetched conclusions without having a hard data like Professor Paulsami told you, right? So without having what we call it as a full clinical trials actually, right? They used to publish the paper, and based on this paper actually a large number of societal things actually tends to happen, right? So this is one of the biggest problem we always have actually. And next one is what we call as the gift authorship. So there is also another thing as the ghost authorship, and all those things will be seen. So what happens is that, so this often happens in a laboratory, so where there is large number of people working actually. So there will be a large number of friends actually, that the students' friends would be there actually. So what I say is that, so you give me authorship in your paper, I will be giving authorship in my paper actually. So this is what the give and take policy would always there between the students actually. You understand? So that is why when you're going for certain grants like what we call the CSIR or something like that, when you're called for an interview actually. So the experts know very well actually what would be your role in certain papers actually. So they leave alone all the papers where you are the first author, right? You are the second author, and they know actually when you are more than 2 actually, or your number is more than 2 automatically, those type of papers will be scrutinized and they will be asking questions about that particular paper or particular work actually. You understand? So this person would not be knowing anything about the work. Only thing is that he will be the co-author of that particular. So this is what we call it as a gift authorship. And we'll be dealing about this gift authorship. There are various ways of this gift authorship and what are the things we'll be seeing it later, right? And the next one is actually not giving sufficient attention or consideration to scholars or the postdocs as per the norm. So this often happens in certain institutions when you are working in certain projects actually. So in those institutions, whatever that happens is that it will always be the postdocs or the what we call the research assistants or someone who will be doing the field work and other works actually. So when it comes to publication or paper presentation in symposia, conferences, or somewhere else actually, so automatically what it will be done is that actually these scholars or what we call it as the postdocs or what we call it as the research assistants would not be given any authorship or any role in that particular presentation. You understand? So it is the PA as well as the members of that project would be giving or sharing the authorship people who actually work on the field actually. So this is one of the things that generally happens in many of the institutions. That means scientific institutions generally this generally happens actually. Right. So there is also another thing that is what we call as the self-promotion at the cost of the team members. So this generally happens is that you tend to get the data and other things from your person actually or your team members, and you start to publish it on your. So this is one of the right. Very way, right? Especially the juniors actually. So you take almost all the work from the juniors and you don't repay them actually or acknowledge them properly, right? The way of authorship. So this is what we call as that. This is also happens actually commonly in many of the laboratories, right? So next one is what we call as the Machiavellianism. So this Machiavellianism is actually what we call as the cunningness of the and the duplicity in general conduct, right? So this is showing power to obtain something. For example, there could be a director of an institute actually. So you will think, I know that actually this is generally happened actually. So this director, what he did was that there are a large number of departments that is under this director actually. So what he does is that he used to send a circular to submit each and every department should submit a write-up on the of a particular topic actually. So what he'll be doing is that he'll be getting all the topics, he'll be compiling and he'll be publishing a book actually. I know a person actually in a director actually, a past director, who had almost published more than 150 such ways. So this is mostly using their power actually to get or to going for publishing actually. So you have got large number of what we call it as the publications. And it is very, very important. What happens is that when you see there are large number of misconducts also happen. So this is actually this has been discussed for a long time in various forums actually, including many of the top journals like Science and Nature often comes out with writers or articles based on these things actually. Right. So if you see almost in 2020, that is the last year, you know, this COVID because was making a havoc all over the world, and this pandemic was making a havoc all over the world. But during even this time, you could see there were a large number of retractions actually. So many papers actually, or from almost many top journals has been retracted due to various scientific misconduct. More than 1,500 papers has been retracted due to various reasons actually, right? So this includes some of the top medical journals like what we call the Lancet or the New England Journal of Medicine actually, right? So this is also includes some of the papers was published on COVID. So you know when there is something that happening, automatically there will be patients in a particular field actually, like the COVID actually, right? So there were a large number of publications, and there were also large number of retractions of many of these papers because they were not soundly based on scientific research actually, right? So if you take up the country Indian scenario, so India is one of the top countries which actually publishes a large number of papers annually. For every year, India publishes almost several thousand papers actually. So we are almost next to China and the United States. We are in the third position actually in the publication, number of publications in both in the biological as well as in the science as well as the engineering field actually. So almost our you could see here of the top 10 countries right in the world that is actually contributing to the scientific papers. So India is almost on the third place, and you could see the growth rate of India is very high actually, right? So compared to many of other countries actually. You understand? So if you see the annual growth rate of India from 2008 to 2018, so it is almost 10.373%. Whereas if you China, it is only 7.81, and if you see United States, it is less than 1% actually. You understand? Again, you should also understand there are more number of researchers working in China and United States compared to India. So this is also that should be taken into consideration. You understand? So we are one of the top most countries, right, publishing papers, and we should. This is also true for almost in different fields. Actually, also if you break up the data into different fields, also you could see India in the top 5 countries, right, publishing papers in almost different types of fields like the health sciences, right, sciences, engineering, as well as the physics and material science and the biological sciences. And the most important thing you could see here is that, right, so China tops in the publication, but when it comes to papers that are retracted or withdrawn, actually, right, so India is also among the top 5 countries actually for retraction. There are countries with highest retraction rate actually. And see here, so this is a, sorry. So this is also one of the important things we should take into consideration. Although we are the top country in publishing so many research articles, and you could see India is also one of the top countries actually where there is large number of retractions. Right. So if we see almost these retractions, so the retractions are the papers that are generally withdrawn due to the various scientific misconducts actually. That is actually, there was a sprout, right? Up to the 2012, actually, there was a big sprout because that is where actually many of these journals went online actually, right? So people were, because previously what people were seeing is that mostly they might be seeing only the hard copy of the journal. So unless you are familiar in that particular topic or very familiar in that particular field actually, so this many of the scientific misconducts would not be visible because very few people are will be going through any of this or they'll be taking up only their topic of interest would be explored actually. But now what happens is that anybody can look into any field actually with the advent of what we call it as an internet of the World Wide Web actually. So once this journals, many of the journals started to go electronically, automatically what happens is that the problem also started. So automatically we get large number of papers that have been retracted for various misconducts, right? So if you see what are the various categories of papers for which retraction has been done actually, so mostly it comes what we call it as actually fraud actually. You understand? So fraud includes a large number of categories, right? Including what we call as plagiarism, right? And it also includes other things like what we call it as a fabrication of the data, manipulation of the data, right? Or there are almost anything like that actually, right? And you could see all these things are generally increasing year by year actually, right? And this is also another important thing. You could see plagiarism almost tops the what we call it as the retraction rate actually. That is because understand most of the retraction of for this plagiarism comes from countries where actually uh, they are not actually native speaking countries actually. For example, mostly in the Asian countries, especially in China, large number of papers wherever the English is not their native language actually. In those countries, the retraction rate for this plagiarism or duplication of the text is generally high actually, right? And the second one is actually what we call as the flawed images actually. So that is what we call as the image manipulations. So these are also done to a certain extent because everybody now has what we call as an computer, and anybody can most to work the good has certain knowledge on what we call as Photoshop or something could actually create images actually, or they can create or they can modify images actually. And there is one thing that has been surfacing of the recent past, that is what we call as the fake video. I will tell you what it is actually, and later when we come to that actually. Right. So now I will show you some of the examples for our own work where it has been repeated in others' work actually. So you could see this was a chapter that was published by a group actually in the year 2015 actually, right? And this is at the left side you got a page of a manuscript, right? So this was published in almost in 2020 actually, right? Just I have to look at the C here and the B this particular book chapter. You understand? So this is enlarged on the right side actually. So this is the figure we had published in the book, that is in the red square actually, and this is the C is actually the paper that is there, the image that has been published here, paper actually from Springer. So what you could say is that it is the same image that has been cropped up actually. So certain parts has been removed, and this same image has been repeated right in the publication, right? And this is not happening actually recently. So in the past, experience on this. For example, the paper that was published in the 2000, a part of my PhD thesis actually. So I want to have you to have this C of this particular paper actually, right? And this was the paper that was published in 2005 by another group actually in the journal actually. And you should take the figure actually one of this particular paper actually. So what we have done is that this is the old image that I published actually, and this is the paper, this is the image that was being published in 2005 by another group. So what they have done is that, so just they have rotated the image, that is how they have done it, right? So just they have rotated the image, and second thing what it was done is that the image which I published was from a plant from a Comelineaceae family, and this image was actually legended as actually a Marsilia minuta, that is actually a development. See? So this is how even the bar never changed, the structures never change, all are the same, right? The only thing is actually the figure has been rotated, right? So why this generally happens? So what shall we do actually? So normally in a normal circumstances, what should we do is that we should have reported to the journal, or reported to the editor of the journal about this actually. But most of these things are done by people who are very well known to you actually. A person known to you, so automatically what you do is that you always kind of soft corner to, because they, when you report such things to the things and then actions are generally taken, right? There's was Paul Sami was saying that actions sometimes would have been very stringent actually, that could have cost them a dear actually. So that is why most of the things actually, although we know it has been done actually, we don't actually communicate, or what we call it as, we don't complain it to the editors actually, right? And this is what we call as double submission or dual publication. So your principal was talking about it actually, right? So here we could see when because we were preparing a review on tapioca, mycorrhizal tapioca. So when we were searching the literature actually, these two papers actually, we got these two papers actually. Here you could see these two papers are published in two different journals actually. So one is the Journal of Ecology and Natural Environment, and another is Journal of Environmental Biology, right? So I think all of you could easily see nothing has been changed actually. It is verbatim same paper that has been published in two different journals actually. You understand? So this is what we call it as double submission, or what we call it the double publication. Understand, when this double submission is generally caught at the time of reviewing or in the process pre-publication stage actually, it is only the papers will be rejected actually, right? But however, when it is caught after publication automatically, because the copyright behind actually for these journals actually, so automatically copyright infringement also comes into existence when such type of activities are generally done. So you could see here the glass example of dual publication or dual submission. So why this dual submission is actually considered to be a misconduct? We should also understand this, because understand, whenever a paper is submitted to a journal actually, so the journal editor sends your paper or the manuscript to the reviewers actually. So many reviewers are actually busy people actually, so they're not paid actually. So they do it for journals. So just for their what we call it as the pleasure actually, right, or the interest on the subject actually. So they don't cost anything, but they do reviewing work for their particular journal. And you see in most of the other promotion and other things also actually this reviewing will not be taken into consideration. So it is for the sheer actually scientific interest people generally do it. So what you do is that this 3 or 4 journals automatically So automatically, if every journal contacts 2 reviewers, think 8 or 10 reviewers will be reviewing the same manuscript, and you are wasting the time of almost because only one version is going to be published, and almost you are going to waste the time of almost other 8 or 10 people actually. You understand? So one is actually wastage of time of the experts actually. And second one is that we have got large amount of data, right? Or scientific data, right? For in the publications. That's in the form of publications. So we do not want redacted or repeated data in the scientific databases. So that is also one of the reasons why this double submission or double publication is not encouraged. But in certain cases, what happens is that, for example, most of the time is what they generally do is that they tend to publish some of even the good works actually generally are published in what we call it as a dialogue in Chinese language actually. For example, I'll give you one example. For example, the work actually that was published in Acta Pharmacica Scientica, right? So in the year 1981, it was about the discovery of the artemisinin for the treatment of malaria, which actually fetched the Nobel Prize in the year 2015 actually. Understand, this paper, which is a landmark paper actually in the discovery of this artemisinin, was cited only once, right, outside China during after its publication. You understand? So now why this happens is that because when you are publishing it in a native language or in a local language, the readership or the viewership is very, very limited actually. So that is one of the reasons why actually such type of works actually goes unnoticed. So what certain people claim is that so the people or a good work that is being published in a local language or in a native language could also be published. Why you should not be published in English? Yes, you can do it actually. So before doing it actually, you should actually consult the editor of an English journal actually, right? And you should explain. And after getting consent actually, the paper has to be published actually, or submitted and published actually. You understand? So when it is published in a local language and another language, because the audience is very small for Chinese, because only people who know Chinese can read that particular paper. Whereas when you publish it in a paper in English, automatically you have a worldwide audience for it. Actually. So that is one of the main reasons. Understand this could be done actually, but it has to be discussed with an editor, right? And how it is to be done actually, and then it has to be submitted to the particular journal. Here is another example I will be giving you. So this is a manuscript actually. This was actually a review article that was submitted to a journal actually. So when you go to this particular manuscript, you could see a large. There was actually a continuous range of style presenting actually, because understand. During the course of your experience, you tend to develop a style of your own in writing and presenting a manuscript actually. You understand that varies from person to person actually. So when you go through this manuscript, actually you could see a large part of this manuscript, there was actually a fluctuating style in presenting the manuscript, right? So when I searched the net for it actually, or when I searched for this information in the net actually, I could see almost this manuscript was verbatim, right? What we call the synthetic paper of already 3 published papers. What he has done is that he has taken different points or different aspects from 3 different papers, and he made a paper of its own action, right? So here you could see this topic of cardiovascular disease is almost appeared on a previous review that is already available in the literature actually. So almost he has plagiarized almost 3 papers from 3 different journals like phytochemistry, food chemistry, as well as the Journal of Cereal Science, and he made a paper on its own actually. And this is also another manuscript here you could see, and the right is actually the original publication. You could see actually for a comparison. So here you could see this is the original publication about a fungal description. And on the left, you could see it is the description, is the verbatim same of what is already there, that has been already published actually. So understand, the one that is published on the right is actually from the specimens that was isolated from US, and the left actually the manuscript was submitted based on the specimens that was recovered and reported from Goa actually. You can understand? So how a Goan specimen and a US specimen have the same description actually? without even the changes in diameter or any of the measurements of the fungal structures actually. So this is actually, these are all what we call it as these are plagiarisms. These are all very clearly visible plagiarism, right? And this is another scenario. So here, what as I already told you, so this is again a manuscript actually. So here you could see in this methodology there are 2 years that has been mentioned, that is 2006 and 2007. So understand, this person is here, find a single author actually. You don't have multiple authors. This is a single author. So when anytime we get a manuscript, what we normally do is that we used to search, right, for other papers that has been published by that particular group actually, right? So when such type of search was generally done, there were 2 already published papers, right, on the same theme that that was dealing with the data of these years separate. For example, that was the paper manuscript submitted with the years 2006 and 2007. Whereas here you could see one paper was on 2006 and another paper was on 2007. What this person has done is that he has taken the 2 papers, he has published the 2 papers separately, and he combined the data of these 2 papers into the third paper. You understand? So this is actually done by certain people to increase their number of publications actually. You understand? So you publish the paper separately, a concept separately, and you combine those 2 and submit it as a third paper. Right? Again, this is also not acceptable. You could see here almost the data are also the same. Many of these data are also the same for these 2 years. Right? So this clearly shows, right, what are the things people generally do to increase their publication. You understand? And there are also circumstances where actually people used to reuse their own material. So this is also one of the biggest problems in finding science. Because people think this is my own work actually, why I should not repeat it in my own paper actually. Understand? You are always signing a copyright agreement, right? Stating that or transferring the rights to the publisher actually. So when you want to republish what you had already done, so you should always take permission from the publisher for republishing it could be an idea or it could be a image or something like that. So automatically what happens is that if you don't get it and when you publish a paper, automatically it becomes an infringement of the copyright. Automatically your paper will be retracted, right? And these are some of the important things that again and again I want. These are the retraction as I already told you, right? And again, an important thing is actually the manipulated image, right? So what you do is that this generally happens in many circumstances where actually because of one large number of software tools are available where you can modify, right, create, right, and manipulate the image. So people, especially youngsters, are very what we call it, are very skilled in doing certain things. Understand? Today we have a large number of softwares to detect this type of image manipulation. So please avoid using such type of tools, right, to manipulate the image. For example, this is one of the examples where actually many of the images you see here are the same image, right? Again, the various things that are the differences you see that was actually created through in a computer program, right? And automatically this paper was generally withdrawn. Right. So this is actually due to plagiarism. So plagiarism is also one of the biggest problem. Because understand, so when there is an evident plagiarism that has been suspected, so now what many of the journals do is that when you submit a manuscript, immediately the manuscript undergoes the process of what we call as a plagiarism check actually. So when they find there is a problem, they used to outrightly reject your manuscript actually. So for example, you might have received, you might have submitted the paper, and many times you might have in the written mail actually, or within a few days, you might have received the paper without undergoing any process actually. You understand? And one of the reasons is actually that paper would be having a high rate of plagiarism because many times they don't indicate it actually, but generally they used to reject the manuscript, right? So I have shown you here one paper actually, right? That rejected paper. You could see here. This is every part of the methodology was verbatim the same of previously published paper. One thing that was Well, the one only thing that was a difference between these two was the size of the samples actually. So in the original paper it was 0.5 grams actually. In the retracted paper it is only 1 gram, right, of the sample. So other things are almost the same. You could see for yourself it is almost a verbatim same of already published paper, right? So this is an evident plagiarism, and I have seen certain students asking me, sir, if only cut, copy, and paste actually to be plagiarism. What happens if I write in a paper and then as I type it? This is also the same thing. So whenever you repeat the same sentence, right, same sentence or same words, right, automatically it is considered to be a plagiarism, right? It is not only others. If you use your own words or if you use your own already published sentences are there, right? And another important thing you should also understand about this scientific context is that, right? So data should always be retained actually. So many of the people don't do it actually. So they don't preserve the original data. For example, many institutions, including our institutions also, we can say. So when the PhD student moves away, or the MSc student or an MPhil scholar generally moves away after finishing a part of their research actually, what they fail to do is that they fail to submit the original data which they generated during the course of their study, right? So what happens is that after the student has gone, actually, the lab mates or the faculty member actually starts to rework on the particular research work and tries to publish the paper. In certain cases, what happens is that when the original data are not available, you are not able to verify the data, whether the validity or the correctness of that data. So that is one of the biggest problems. And there is also another problem is that when the journal asks to perform some certain additional calculations or additional statistical analysis on the data that you are presenting, automatically, unless you have the raw data, that will be very, very difficult to add. Similarly, the photographs also are very, very important. So here you could see, right? This is a paper that was withdrawn from Nature or retracted from Nature. So this paper was one of the highly cited papers actually, the Web of Science actually, and ranked among top 1% of the papers in the field that was published in the last 10 years. Even that paper was retracted because the figures was available for that particular paper. Actually. That was mentioned in the particular was not available. You understand? So this is one of the previous situations, and I think that most of the institutions should have certain repository facilities, right, to collect and store the data. Actually, to collect and store the data. So nowadays with lab note actually, even the lab note actually we try to a sheet or some soft versions actually. The soft versions should be retained by the permanent faculty or the permanent person in an institution. And understand whenever such type of retraction occurs, actually it is not necessary for all the authors to actually agree with the retraction. Here you could see certain authors actually agreeing with the retraction. Certain people they don't agree with the retraction. Again, certain people even they do not respond to what is actually when they are contacted about this paper. Actually. So this is also a very important thing that we should take note when you are doing your research actually. So now we have large number of this data archiving repositories. So where you can submit your data. So we had one thing of submitting a data for a particular because whenever you submit papers to certain type of journals like what the NSO, that is a Nordic Society OKR's journals, right? So immediately they say is that whatever the data or the raw data you got, that should always be submitted. So when you submit it to this what we call the databases, they used to give you an accession number which should be quoted in your paper. So this is almost like a publication, the data will be available. So whenever anybody has any, or it has to be verified, the data could be easily taken from this database. So here I have given a list of some of the repositories where actually you can submit your data actually. So every one of us know actually the sequences are generally submitted in the GenTime. Apart from this, there is something called the trias where you could submit actually many of the data you have generated and understand certain because submitting data in such type of in certain databases, they generally charge. But if you're going for submitting such type in journals, in certain journals like what we call the NSO journals, as I told you, Nordic Society of Journals, what they generally do is that they usually pay your what we call it as the fees regarding the data submission. So it will be a free of cost when you the data for these journals actually. You understand? So the large number of repositories that are already available, right, where you can make use of, right? So instead of taking and collecting and keeping and for you in your lab actually, you could go in for this such type of international repositories where you can submit that data. Right. And the one thing that I was also telling you the recent years that is catching up is what we call the fabricated peer review process. So this is one of the biggest thing actually, and currently is very widely done in many cases actually, where actually the review process itself is generally manipulated by the authors. So what they do is that the journals actually, they used to ask about 3 to 5 experts in that particular journal who could review your manuscript. So it is not necessary for the editor to send your manuscript to that particular persons actually. But what happens is that in certain cases or certain situations where journals cannot spare time to contact the reviewers or specialists in that particular field, always take one or two reviews from the list which you have already submitted. So what certain persons do is that, so these people create, right, a false, right, email IDs of a strong person, of a well-known person in that particular field, working in higher reputed institutions. They used to create the email IDs of these persons, and they used to get the manuscript and they used to review the manuscript, their own manuscript, and submit the reports actually. So this is one of the very recent things that is happening, and you find large number of papers that have been retracted recently because of this type of falsified, right, peer review process. You understand? Again, there is also one thing that is many, whenever, according to scientific ethics, you should never actually list, right, your friends, your lab mates, right, who are now or in the past are well known to you or who authored your papers actually as a reviewer for the work or the scientific work that you are submitting. Right? But many people does not follow this actually. So this is also considered to be a misconduct actually. So whenever you are giving a reviewer list actually, see that the persons are not related in any way to your lab or your lab actually, especially to your lab in the present or in the past. You understand? So once as long as you have a good time, nothing surfaces. But when your time is bad, actually, automatically you generally get into suit. I'll show you the next example. Right? So actually, the person that is the senior author of this particular paper, right, got almost 9 papers of his rejected almost in 2 years time actually, 2017 and 18 actually. So what he has done is that he has actually given actually the list of reviewers, right, and he has fabricated almost all the email IDs, right, and most of the positive comments that were submitted for his manuscript was his own actually. You understand? So this is something very serious actually. So this came into light. So when this person submitted this paper to this journal, that is the crop protection, so the review list actually that was submitted by this person was personally known to the editor of this particular journal. So he got suspicious about the email IDs that he was providing, and he verified it with the people in the institutions, and he found actually all these email IDs were fake, right? And all the what we call it as the reports that he got actually was from his own or was submitted by this particular author. So almost we could see almost a great number of papers in published in good journals like the Chemosphere or the Crop Protection, right? So once this has been found, automatically this editor actually cautions the publisher as well as the other journals where this paper appears. Almost this resulted in the retraction of 9 papers that was published between them at 27 and 28. So understand, if this paper has not gone to this particular journal or the editor, who this where actually or the reviewers who are known to this editor. So if the reviewers are unknown to the editor, automatically he would have this. So that is what I always say, that as long as your time is good, actually nothing happens. So when you are in that case, actually everything comes into problem, right? So this is what we call as the fabricated review process. And let us now go into the next thing, that is what we call the manuscript authorship. So this is where most discussions generally go on. So just I wanted to have a look at these cartoons that that is available on the internet actually, and some of them are really very funny actually. You could see that the one of the extreme right actually, which says that, right. So this is a night watchman actually, right? So that is how actually the authorships are generally given today actually, right? So an authorship or the problems with authorship is generally becoming increasingly complicated, because today we do not have an individual research. Instead, we have a combined research which involves almost many departments or many institutions, right? So which may be within the country or in other countries also, right? Worldwide, actually, research operations are going on. So automatically, what happens is that it always increases or complicates the authorship issue. So whenever it comes to the authorship, who should be the first and who should be the last is always a big problem. So in our country, we always fight for the senior author or the first author. For the most of the Western countries, they always for the last author, because the last author would be the senior most member of the group actually. So they always fight for the last. So that is between us and actually the Westerners actually, right? So an author when an author appears in an author list of a manuscript, he should have a direct significant involvement in the study, right? Either in the conceptualization of the study, designing of the experiments, data collection or analysis of the data or interpretation of the results, right? So he should have done anything with it, or he should have involved in the drafting and revising. He should have involved in the final version of the manuscript for publication, right? And again, the responsibility of the accuracy or the integrity of all the aspects of the research should be based on him actually. So if any of these things actually is satisfied, he could be included as an author, right? Simply, if you could say that the International Committee of Medical Journals editors says that an author must have a substantial intellectual contribution to the particular work. Unless you have a substantial intellectual contribution, so you should not be given an authorship. So whenever you have done something which does not revolve around this intellectual contribution, your place should be in the acknowledgement, not in the authorship actually. So there are different types of this problem. One is that what we call the honorary authorship. So here what happens is that so when some person who is well known in that particular field is included in your author list actually, automatically it increases your chance of publication in good journals. So what we do is that even though that person was not involved in any of the stages, right? So we include his name, right? And we start with some journal. So with or without, understand, it is always important to get the consent of all the authors before submitting a manuscript. I will show you what happens if it is not done, right? And second one is that what we call the gift authorship. That is mostly happens in the Asian culture, because so in certain institutions you could see all the papers that is coming from a particular department of the institution will be bearing the name of an institutional head or the institution or the departmental head, right? All the papers, irrespective of whether that person, right, contributes to the research or not, actually, his or her name would be included in the author list. So this is what we call it as the gift authorship. And this is one of the most important things that is being practiced in the Asian countries or the Asian culture. Because understand, if you don't satisfy your superiors, automatically you will tend to end up in some problem. So to satisfy the superiors or to have certain advantages actually, so these people are generally given an authorship, right, in many of the journals. And I could also remember one case actually in a review process. Actually, what happened was that a person is also a co-author actually. He's actually the head of the group because I know him personally actually. I see the acknowledgement, and the acknowledgement actually acknowledgement are actually thanks the head of the department for permitting to do the work actually. So this fellow is also an co-author of the particular paper, and he is also thanked for actually giving permission to do the work actually. So this is how generally it happens in our country actually. So this is what we call it as an Asian culture actually, right? And next one is what we call it as the coercive authorship or the forceful guest authorship. That means actually, right? So threatening people to include it as an author actually. So this is one of the biggest things that happens, right, in certain conditions or in certain institutions where actually the people are forced to include certain people as their author. So I could give you one example actually, right? So in recent past, what happened was that a student has completed his MSc from a college actually, and he joined for a PhD program in a different institution actually. So during his actually his PhD tenure, what he has done is that he has worked on the MSc project what he has done, and he submitted paper to the guide actually, right? And this actually was submitted, and this paper was actually reviewed, and it was accepted for publication. So at that time, actually, what the guide did was that she or he wanted to include the name of the head of the department in the particular authorship. He wanted she or he wanted to give the authorship to the HOD of the particular department in an accepted paper. You understand? So automatically what was done is that, so when the student refused, because understand the person or the head of the department of the private institute was not there or did not have any role in the study actually, right? So he refused to add him as a co-author. Ultimately what the guy did was that she wrote to the editor that actually the work was not actually consulted, the paper was not consulted of her actually, with her actually before its submission, and she was not aware of the submission as well as the acceptance process actually. You understand? So this also generally happens. So this is what we call it as the coercive authorship or the forceful guest authorship. So a person who does not have any role, intellectual role in a particular scientific presentations or in the scientific outcome should never, right, looking for having a authorship in a journal actually. So this is what we call it as the coercive authorship or the forceful guest authorship, right? So this is what I told you. This is an example actually. So here you could see this particular paper was generally retracted due to this, because one of the co-author has written to the editor that she was not consulted, or he or she was not consulted, right, for for publication, right? And the authors themselves, other authors themselves, actually, what they have done is that a particular one of the authors of this particular paper has communicated without the knowledge of the other authors, co-authors, and the particular co-author, and got the paper published. So automatically, what it was done is that, so automatically this is scientific misconduct. Automatically, the paper was rejected. So understand, these are some of the important things you should always keep in mind. Actually, so the thing may be very small actually. For example, getting a consent from somebody or something would be very simple. But when you don't do it actually, or you do it high-handed, automatically you tend to end up in wrong. Right. So there are certain misconducts or disadvantages that has happened. So understand, fixing this breach of ethics is not a very easy thing. It is a very long process. Sometimes it takes several months or several years together actually. You can understand? So for example, I will give you one example. Almost it follows the other things for the others also. For example, when you have what we call as a manipulated image, so what happens is that somebody informs the editor that the manipulation of the image is done. To understand one thing, most of the whistleblowers for many of the problems will be in your own lab or a person well known to you actually. Understand this is very important thing because a person in another lab or another thing will not be able to do or will not be able to find, right? So the wrong things that have been done by you actually. It's only a person who is very close to you will be able to find it actually. So understand the whistleblowers will always be very close to you or we will be in your lab actually. So be very careful because unless you have a good relationship with the other teammates as well as the others actually, right? So whatever a small thing or a small wrong that is being done, that could be made into a big issue, right? So I don't say that these things are actually good and they should be done. And understand most of the this problem generally surfaces from mostly from the close associates of a particular lab actually. You can understand? So whenever a person actually informs the editor of certain manipulations, right? So what the editor does is that immediately he used to reply to the person actually thanking him for intimating it, right? So he sends that particular what we call it as a paper or a manuscript to a reviewer or a person actually to see if there is any such type of manipulations done on this particular image. So now we have got large number of softwares. They don't send to the reviewers. What they do is that they themselves actually screen it using this image softwares to see if there is any manipulation. So what happens is that when there is actually then the editor contacts the call it as an author actually, right? So understand, being a corresponding author is always very a responsible job actually. It is always the corresponding author who is contacted first because he is the person who will be signing the agreement actually, right? So automatically actually the corresponding author will be contacted to give the explanation, right? So sometimes what happens is that there could be certain minor issues or minor manipulations, and these minor manipulations could not have affected the what we call it as the outcome of the result or the conclusion of the study. So when the manipulation is very minimum, what happens is a correction measure could be republished actually, right? So the things then actually automatically the editor does not follow it beyond it except for correcting that particular error. For example, you might have actually darkened your image or certain portion of the image. So that is not actually going to affect the results unless the intensity of the color or the intensity of the image actually is a factor that is determining your results actually, right? So if the author does not respond, immediately what the editor does is that, or the co-author is the what the corresponding author does not respond, immediately what the editor does is that he used to contact other co-authors because it is very, although we give the corresponding author email only, it is easy to find the other co-author email for the internet thing is generally available. So what they do is that contact the co-authors. And if the co-authors never respond to any of these queries, automatically they used to contact the head or the superior of the particular institution, right? And they used to submit a report or they seek the clarification for particular people or the persons actually. You can understand. So in certain institutions, what they do is that they immediately used to set up a committee to look into the issue. So the outcome of the report of this committee would be submitted to the journal editor. So based on that, actually, journal editor would take appropriate actions. But in most cases, generally what happens is that the institutions also do not take any action. So the only course for the editor is to see, right, the integrity of the public of the matter, right? And if he feels actually there is actually the manipulation image that is done that is going to affect the conclusion, he reflects the paper. And when it is inclusive, generally what happens is that the editor every 3 months or 6 months again he will be contacting or reminding the institution. So it is a very long process. Sometimes it takes several years before any decision could be taken, right? So the same thing is also for a duplicate or redacted publication. And this is also same for where actually you get a large number of duplication or redacted publication or plagiarism. Almost it is the same, actually the same thing, that same step will be taken by the editors. So it is a very long process, I told you, right? So what happens when an article is retracted? So obviously that is not, it will not be very visible because you have only the hard copy of the journals. So now what happens is that most of the journals, that they have their what we call as online versions actually, and these online versions generally have this retraction being printed as a watermark on the manuscript, right? So automatically it tends to remain right in the database as long as the paper is there, or for ever long it will be in the database. Only thing is that people don't consult that particular paper, actually citing this paper should actually. So other things, actually it is actually a what we call it as a place or a black in the career of a scientist. So this is one of the last thing anybody could see in their career, right? And the retraction could not be done by the editor because there are also a large number of steps that has to be, or there are a large number of criteria that has to be satisfied before the retraction could be done, right? So this committee on publication ethics has given certain restriction guidelines, actually, retraction guidelines, right? So one is that actually there should be a clear evidence that the findings are unreliable, right? Second one is that there could be certain major errors. For example, in many of the mathematical papers, actually, sometimes actually the theorems and other things that could be actually, these calculations could be wrong actually. And others, or some happens is that the experimental errors could be there, right? And there could be certain fabrication of data or modification of the data. For example, it could be image manipulation or a creation of the data, right? Or it could be a plagiarism, redacted publication, right? And the material or data without authorization of use. For example, when you are using the copyrighted material, you should also get actually permission. Otherwise, there would also be copyright infringement, right? Ethical research. For example, there is an ethical issue when you are using animals or the human subjects, actually, that should be followed. When you do not follow it, automatically it tends to become unethical. This is very true when you are doing the medical research, actually, right? And published, so because publications are manuscript that is published solely on the basis of compromised or manipulated peer review process, as I already told you or showed you. And authors fail to disclose the major competing interest. That means conflict of interest, right? And again, retraction notices should actually link to that retracted article whenever possible, right? In the online versions, I told you, you could also have seen actually in some of the slides I showed you, there will be a watermark of this retraction actually, right? So clearly identify the retracted article. This includes almost the title, author, as well as the retraction heading, and also the reason for retraction should also be clearly identified actually, right? And this retraction should be published promptly, right? So this would actually minimize the harmful effects actually, as Professor Aruchami was telling, right? So when this particular information is there, as long as it's in the public domain, automatically a large number of ill effects could happen. So you get large number of citations. There could also be other studies, right? So, or based on which could have based the studies on the particular study. So automatically this could breed on false research actually. So automatically it should be published promptly to minimize the effects actually, right? And it should be freely available to all the readers. So that is why you see this retraction notice. So this, although journals, manuscripts will not be available or will not be easily available to the readers, retraction that would be a free view actually of journals actually, right? And we should clearly state that who is actually written the article, because sometimes the authors may feel that what they have done is actually wrong and they can retract the article. or sometimes the editor actually retracts of a particular journal retracts the article. And again, who retracts the article is also very, very important, right? Again, the reason for the retraction should be clearly specified on the retraction notice, right? And again, inflammatory or displacing language should never be used actually when in the retraction notices. So you could see many of the retraction notices would be very polite actually, just they were mentioning the reason for retracting and not more anything than else actually, right? So retraction is not possible, it's not appropriate if the authorship dispute is there actually. Only if there is an authorship dispute actually, so that does not require what we call it as a retraction actually. So it is only a discussion because many journals what they generally do is they have a certain way of presenting the authorship. So normally what happens is that normally the authors are generally presented the force of the involvement in the particular research actually. So who for most of the research will be given the senior author, and according to the volume of the work that is being done, actually the authorship generally goes on actually. In cases, what happens is that certain journals what they say is that you put the authors according to their alphabets actually, right? So automatically alphabetical order when the authors are presented normally. So normally you could see certain stars being put on certain authors, and they would be saying that these people contributed equally to this particular work. When two or more people contributed to the particular work, actually, this is again that is being mentioned actually, right? Then, so again, retraction is not necessary when the main findings of the work is reliable, right? And just you what we call it as the publish the corrections, right, which will sufficiently address the errors. For example, sorry. So in certain cases, what happens is that the people might have forgot to include the what we call it as the units for the variables which they generally mentioned for it, whether it is a centimeter, meter, or millimeter, they may have forgotten. So this is not a very big thing actually, but it is a serious thing when you are considering scientific reliability. So automatically this could be corrected. For example, you could republish it, the table with the units actually. Automatically this generally goes off actually, right? So again, an editor does not have an conclusive evidence to support the retraction. So again, he needs some additional information, right, from the institutional investigation. And again, if the conflict of interest have reported to the journal of the publication, right, but in the editor's view, that is does not have influence the interpretation or the recommendations of the conclusion of the article, automatically the retraction may not be possible. Right? So automatically what happens is that the retraction note is generally summarized here actually on the right actually. So here what has been the coriander, that is the correction for this particular article, right? So there were certain corrections in the images which what this author did, it was this B and C, what he did was that he actually copy pasted the same image actually. So noticed by the authors later of the publication that what they did was that they corrected the image and they republished it actually, this image actually. So such type of corrective action could also be taken, right? So in certain countries, what or certain continents, what they have done is that they had also studied the various reasons for this papers being retracted. For example, this is one recent study that is from the African continent actually. So here you could see that most of the papers from Africa was, most of the papers that has been published in Africa is generally retracted due to three important reasons. One is actually that, second is the duplicate publication, third is the analysis of the data. So these are the three forms in which actually the retraction was done actually, right? Again, you could see here interest is some for example, as Paulson has said actually, sometimes we receive funding from certain agencies. For example, in industry would be funding you. So what we normally do is that even though the results are negative, we used to publish a positive results actually for favoring the industry. So this generally happens actually. So here you could see, so most of the papers actually what happens is that, so the most of the papers on this what we call as the BT crop efficiency, right? So most of this, almost 40% of the uh, papers that are published generally comes from the funding that was funded by the industries which are producing these GM crops. So clearly, you could see here actually what happens is that these papers would never give any data or results, right? That would be negative to the introduction or growth of this BT crops actually. So this is what generally happens actually. So the many of the declaration of conflict actually almost many of these are funded by the companies. For example, you could see here almost 40% of the funding generally for the GM studies comes from companies that generally are involved in this production of this GM crop actually, right? Right. So again, this declaration of conflict of interest is very important because now almost in many of the journals they used to have this section actually conflict of interest statement has to be given. Otherwise, also they used to get it in what we call that copyright agreement. Also, actually, they used to get it actually. So, in addition to copyright thing, they also get this declaration of conflicting interest actually, right? So this generally happens, this conflict of interest generally happens when the authors, reviewers or editors has certain interest, right? So which is not fully apparent when the paper is generally published, as Paulson said actually. So when the paper is published, it does not have any impact other than actually it is a scientific knowledge. But later on what happens is that when the industry starts exploring it, automatically it leads to a lot of problems actually, right? So but later what happens, he could have made a reasonable feel that that he or she might have misled or deceived. For example, one example was Dr. Paulson was saying that after taking a medicine, actually, the person developed certain serious side effects, right? So that is one of the main reasons you find in the pharmaceutical industry because understand most researchers in medical field is generally sponsored by pharmaceutical industries. Actually. So they wanted to because they spend millions and millions of dollars to actually to design and as well as to develop a drug actually. So automatically when they have to market it, automatically it should be based on certain sound scientific basis. So they tend to sponsor the research. And many of the drugs actually, which are generally introduced into the market, I do not know if you know or not, almost 50 to 60% of the drugs that are introduced into introduction actually, right? And sometimes conflict of interest may also arise from relationships actually when you don't have any good relationships, right? Or sometimes you have this allegations or hostilities to those groups or organizations of interest actually, which may influence the existence of movements or actions. So it's not serious when you take this what for example, you might be having a trade secret actually. So one or some of your colleagues, they could take this secret and actually they would be revealing it to the competitive company. What happens? Your uniqueness in the industry generally goes off actually, right? So again, this issue is also particularly sensitive when such interested are private or maybe result in personal gain. Actually, as I now told you one example actually, right? And another important thing is that this conflict of interest really do not have anything to do with the what we call it as the evaluation of the manuscript, right? So evaluation of the manuscript is generally is not much affected by this conflict of interest unless otherwise, right? The manuscript is generally reviewed by a person who is in the same line, the same field. So when two persons work in the same field, so this is also a very big problem. So when a manuscript goes to that particular person, he always tries to avoid publication of this particular work because once this paper is published automatically, right, his paper or his work could not be published very easily. So that is the main reason why such type of things can be happen. Right. And now you should understand something about this predatory journals. So Paul Samisar was telling, and this is a fact today. So we have a large number of journals today, right? So which publishes large papers, right, online within a very short period of time, within 24 hours actually. Only thing criteria is that you have to pay your publication fee or the page charges, right? So you pay the publication fee and page charges today night, and tomorrow morning when you wake up, your paper will be online actually. So that is how the quickness these people, these people work at. Because understand, publication is a multi-million dollar industry. So it is, although we say it is scientific and other things actually, so it is an industry. So it is not only the people who should have this, what we call it as the scientific ethics, it is also the publishing house. These people should also have a, what we call it as a scientific ethics. They should also follow this scientific ethics. And here you could see there is large number of papers that is being published. I think this article appeared in Current Science actually sometime back. And if somebody is interested, just to go and have a look at it, there actually they almost they've given a lot of emphasis on specifications and what are the causes and how they should be avoided. And if you see who are people publishing, almost you could see almost all type of institutes, right? Whether it may be private or national, they tend to publish in such type of journals actually. You understand? So because of their, for example, you will be having a promotion, say for example, 1 month actually, they had actually, so you have to publish a paper or because your competitor has a few papers, 1 or 2 papers more than you, and you have to be equal to him or you should be above him actually. One thing is that immediately you go in for such type of journals. So these are something compulsions that always make people to do some this type of publishing, this type of journals actually. Can you understand? So your annual report has to be written actually. So automatically your progress has to be shown. So because I told you, a good journals publishing takes time actually. So when it's basically in a journal, automatically you should go in another journal. Again, it takes 3 months or 5 months or 6 months. Again, it is large amount of time. Right? By the end of the year, actually, you are not able to have any papers. Just you have to show some papers going for this credit. So this is how actually people going for this credit journals. Right. So it is not only this actually. So it is also the scientific ethics should also be followed by publishers or the journals actually, as I already told you. Because understand, there was a survey actually that was published some time back actually, which clearly showed that many of the journals actually, right, boost their self-citations, right, or what we call it as the inflate their, they tend to have a large number of corrective citations, right? So simply what they do is that they ask to say to include the papers published in their own journals. Right? So what happens is that you know always that the impact factors are calculated based on the papers that has been that is the papers the number of citations in the previous 2 years divided by the number of papers that is published in the previous 2 years by the particular journal. So automatically when you increase the number of citations, automatically your impact factor then goes. So mostly you could see the survey that was conducted sometimes back actually that almost 24% of this academic works actually that is being conducted in economics, sociology, psychology, and multiple business disciplines, right, has experienced this coercive citation. And here are some of the examples where actually, right, so these journals have been taken out of this, what we call it as infection list actually because of high number of self-citations actually. Can you understand? And again, there are the journals also undergo certain what we call as the scientific methods, right? So which is also sometimes non-ethical to actually to increase their impact factor. As I was telling you, impact factor could also be manipulated. For example,